Luca Cagnoni and Shakir Mukhamadullin stand out as the Sharks fall to the Ducks 3-2.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, caretaker at the Reef, also the co-host of Locked On NHL. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen, proudly part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day. And if you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do is just follow along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. And tonight we'll be breaking down the Sharks, baby Sharks, CUDA Plus 3-2 loss to the Anaheim Ducks. The Sharks, it was an AHL team. The Sharks put out tonight against a very veteran Ducks team. So we'll be talking about Shakir Mukhamadullin and Luca Cagnoni, as they were definitely the bright spots for the Sharks tonight, plus some of the other players who I thought stood out. Penalty troubles and the collapse in the second period, kind of as the bad and ugly part of this game. And then we'll kind of what's the next steps for the Sharks, as we should start to see more roster moves here going into as we get ready for our last three preseason games. So let's start. We'll kind of continue the good, bad, ugly kind of theme or formula for these preseason games. And I think the good even though the Sharks definitely, again, this was a very AHL heavy lineup for San Jose with, like the only kind of really full-time NHLers in this game was like Liljegren and Mukhamadullin, Gaudette, Kurashev, Desharnais. Like it was and Ty Dellandrea, like very AHL heavy, which if you're wondering why the Sharks did this, it's because my guess is they wanted to get a lot of these guys some preseason experience, especially a road game, before sending a lot of these guys down to the AHL and then letting some of the these last three games really determine these kind of final roster spots for the Sharks, and as they try to kind of make some decisions. So that's my assumption of why they kind of took this approach and as a very heavy AHL roster tonight. So let's start with, like I said, let's start with Mukhamadullin, who I thought had an excellent game tonight. And, coming back to the scene of crime with Frank Petrano. And I thought Mukhamadullin showed a lot of poise tonight. He was relied on heavily by Ryan Warsofsky. He played a team high almost 22 minutes tonight, especially among the defenders. Like he was out there the most amongst all the defense. He did a really good job of kind of shutting down plays, making just those little subtle plays to kind of stop pucks and stop scoring chances. There's a couple there where just Mukhamadullin, just nice little stick move, or kind of just these nice little last minute moves to shut down potential scoring opportunities. And Mukhamadullin just looks like he's back to kind of being Shakir Mukhamadullin and should go into the season. There's a lot of expectations for Mukhamadullin as he enters this season, right? Is a very big kind of I don't want to say make or break season for Mukhamadullin, but this kind of feels like this is the season where Mukhamadullin can solidify himself, not only as a full-time NHL player, but a legitimate top four defenseman for the Sharks, right? As they continue to revamp this blue line to go with their young forwards. And I think Mukhamadullin, he's just been really steady and had an assist tonight, primary assist on the Pavel Regenda goal on the power play. I know he had a little bit of a flub that kind of led to the second goal, and we'll talk more about the kind of that second period collapse there in a little bit. But I do think Mukhamadullin overall was one of these strong Sharks players, especially early on when they were still kind of trying to figure things out a little bit. But yeah, I think Mukhamadullin, really strong performance tonight. And then also on the blue line, Luca Cagnoni, just the bandwagon for Cagnoni has got to be overflowing right now, because This kid is just special. And I know there's going to be a call like Cagnoni should start the season 8 in the NHL. And I totally get it. But I do think for Cagnoni, like spending some more time in the AHL, ironing out your games. That way, when you do get that like NHL call up, it's over. And like that's the like, okay, Cagnoni's an NHL player from now on. But he made so many smart plays tonight and so many great plays. And you saw the 2-on-1 breakup against Leo Carlson, and I flashed straight back to the playoffs where he did the exact same thing in the playoffs against the Ontario Reign for the CUDA this year. Exact same situation, 2-on-1, breaks it up with a perfect stick placement and just knocks it down in the playoffs. So he feeds it the other way. That leads to a Philip Beestead goal. Wasn't able to pull that off tonight, but a huge just kind of like momentum killer there for the Ducks as Luca Cagnoni continues to do awesome Luca Cagnoni things. Basically ragdolled Beckett Seneca at one point. Like just so many smart play. There's a play with where he just beats Mikael Granlund, and he's just so smooth about everything he does. Such just like the footwork and the skating. He's so good. And yes, I would love to see Luca Cagnoni playing in the NHL as soon as possible. But again, I'm trying to be like realistic here. And when Cagnoni gets called up, I want Cagnoni to get called up, and then that's it. Like he's a like boom NHLer from there on. So I'm okay with him starting the season in the AHL. I think he's gonna have a big season in the AHL this year. I think he's going to continue to show why he's such a underrated, player. And his ceiling is so freaking high. But yeah. He's so good. I love what Luca Cagnoni is legitimately one of my favorite players to watch, just because he's every time he just touches the ice, just an absolute treat. Just the way he manipulates people, the way he just takes advantage of time and space and creates time and space, and just makes everybody on the ice better. You can see he's an engine out there, just an engine out there. But some other guys who I thought played pretty well tonight as well. Got a goal there on with the one person dubbed the world's slowest toe drag. Good for him to get on. I thought he played pretty well tonight. Kurashev continuing to do positive things, right? And kind of Kurashev getting to the center of the center ice and in front of like those kind of prime opportunity areas in front of the slots, in the slot there. Like you continue to see him doing that. I do think I do think Dellandrea played much better tonight compared to what we saw last time when he was on the ice. You probably think, well, what was the big difference? He wasn't playing with Marco Goodrow tonight. Just saying. But I do think Dellandrea had a much better night, was just much more effective tonight. Wasn't making kind of the dumb plays and penalties that he did last game. And I do think Dellandrea much better. Again, the bar's on the floor right now with guys like Goodrow and Dellandrea, but I do think Dellandrea just had a much more effective game tonight. And then Egor Afanasyev, I was really impressed with his game. That dude is tough. Took a couple of shots from like Jacob Trouba and Radko Gudas, and just like no big deal. He's probably going to start in the AHL, but I think he's going to play some NHL games this year because of that toughness. And of course the size, right, with Afanasyev. But you see a lot of guys with that size where they just kind of like they don't use it to their full potential. Like Afanasyev uses his body to his full potential. I thought he played really well tonight. A lot of little subtle plays and a lot of tough plays from him tonight. Pavel Regenda got the goal off just being Johnny in the spot right there with the puck coming off his, bouncing off his skate. He also drew a penalty against, I think it was Gudas actually, who it was a double minor if I recall. Was it Gudas? Yeah. So And like I think he's gonna have a big season with the Barracuda as well this year. I really like how I do like Pavel Regenda had a couple penalties tonight for Regenda as well. We'll talk about the penalties here in a minute, but it was Trouba. He drew on Trouba, the two penalties on Trouba. Sorry, but even though like the Sharks struggled to create consistent offense tonight, there was a lot of, I think, standout performances. And I think that's what Warsofsky was looking for, right? Is we know we're in a tough situation here. But I do think that we definitely saw some better compete, which I know is a big thing for Warsofsky tonight. I do think we saw a much better compete from that. So, but we're going to get to the bad and the ugly here. As penalty troubles and a very kind of Sharks-esque collapse in the middle of the second period. So we'll get to that here in just 1 second. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 on bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. If you had the Dolphins beating the Jets, congrats on your $300 in bonus bets. I did think Tua was going to throw a pick, so my bad on that. But I do like that with FanDuel. It gives you many different ways to play. You got built-in parlays, player props, or even jumping in on the live lines during the games. Makes watching football even more exciting when you got a little bit something riding on the action. So if you're ready to get going, visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. All right, before we continue, I do, of course, want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. If you haven't yet, perfect time to subscribe as we'll continue to cover all the Sharks preseason games. We have 3 more games this week, guys. We'll cover all the big roster moves and then get you ready for we got a new season starting next week, guys. New season, which should be one of the funnest seasons in a long while in San Jose. So make sure you follow along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. All right. So the good, there's plenty of good player performances. The bad, penalty troubles, and 100%, like refs in the preseason and early in the season, they're going to call things much stricter, right? And because they're usually trying to kind of set like the tone of the season, and there's going to be things that there's an emphasis on, whether it's whatever it's going to be, and we'll learn quickly into the new season whatever the emphasis is here. Penalty troubles for your San Jose Sharks continued to crop up again tonight as the Sharks took a butt ton of penalties, 14 penalty minutes. And yes, the Ducks took their fair share. They also took 14 penalty minutes. But in a game where you are severely outgunned, right, and Ducks roster full, like very close to what you expect their opening night roster to be, with all the veterans in the game tonight. You have to win that area if you want to try to compete in this game. And unfortunately, the Sharks, I thought, took a lot of dumb penalties. Some of the penalties, like, okay, Desharnais is taking a penalty during like the whole Jacob Trouba Regenda situation, right? Regenda clean hit on Granlund. Of course, Trouba's going to jump in and protect this guy. Cross checks Regenda, gets the 4 minutes right there. Desharnais is sticking up for this guy. Like, of course, as long as you end up with the power play there, like that stuff's going to happen. And of course, the refs, right? They're going to try to even things out so that way the game doesn't escalate, right? Because the worst thing is if the refs don't call anything, or if the refs are too one-sided, it's going to continue to escalate. So, right, you're going to see that. But just a lot of like kind of sloppy. Regenda had a couple like sloppy penalties there. Desharnais, 3 separate penalties. And again, even if you throw out the one where it was, like it was, coincidental minors or whatever, like 2 other ones, just not good penalties. And we saw this crop up like the other night. We saw the same exact thing where it's just dumb penalties. And you're putting yourself in a bad position. And to kind of piggyback on that, the special teams, and again, like I know it's a lot of young players kind of trying to figure things out, but the power play looks super disjointed tonight. Like it felt like the Ducks had way better shorthanded chances than the Sharks had power play opportunities. Other than when it kind of like Mukhamadullin was out there and leading towards that goal, and that was a very NHL kind of roster right there, or line right there with that power play. But penalties, just you're not a talented enough roster to overcome just dumb penalties. And hopefully it's more of a sign of the preseason where refs are going to be a little quicker to the whistle to try to kind of set the tone for the season. Hopefully it's just more of that and this doesn't bleed over into the regular season, but just something I want to keep my eye on, especially these last 3 preseason games, is the penalties and which Sharks are kind of the guys getting called for it. So the ugly, of course, has to be this just kind of middle, just like 5 minutes, right, where everything goes off the rails. And how many times have we seen this from the Sharks, right, where they play pretty solid and they're hanging in there for a majority of the game, and then you just have 5 minutes. And this was actually just 3 minutes of just everything going wrong, right? You have the power play goal there on really Cutter Gauthier, and like great play by Gauthier, just kind of popping up there and getting banking that in. Like I do think Jacob Shakir played really well tonight and got hung out to dry in that this 5 minute period where everything just went wrong. I do think Shakir played really well tonight. And the defense just did not help him here. So, but power play goal right there, and then you get Barracuda like literally less than a minute later, who crushes one on that's the Mukhamadullin flub that just doesn't, like, it looks like Mukhamadulin's got the puck, he's got control, he's going to calm things down, and then it just ends up squirting out towards Gudis, where he ends up scoring. And then you have the Frank Vatrano finishing up the 2-on-1 there, or actually it was a 2-on-2 where Cole Clayton just loses Frank Vatrano, and didn't, like, those moments, and like that's what you worry about. These are the things that Ryan Warsofsky needs to kind of iron out, right? Is we can't have these like 5 minutes of just absolute chaos, and where the team just falls apart for 5 minutes. Right, is how do you stop the bleeding? How do you, and that's something he talks about a lot, right? Is how do you respond? How do you kind of get back to basics, et cetera, et cetera? But those 5 minutes tell the story of this entire game, because, I mean, the Ducks, outplayed the Sharks for the majority of this game, but the Sharks did fight. Like, credit to the Sharks, right? They fought after that. They kind of fought back and played really well the second half of the second period there, and got back into this game. But then the Ducks in the beginning of the third period really just kind of put the hammer down and finished the game, and kind of put the Ducks, like, they didn't score, but they did a good job of really cleaning up and like playing keep away, right? And that's that part of that defenses for nerds go score points. Even though they didn't score points, they controlled the game, and they weren't just sitting on their heels and kind of letting the Sharks try to set up their offense. They did a really good job of controlling the game there until the Sharks tried to make a desperate push at the end after they got that goal. So, but good thing it's preseason, doesn't matter. And, I think these next three preseason games we'll talk about here more in a little bit, but these are going to be big for the Sharks, as it's going to be much more NHL heavy roster. So we'll discuss kind of what's next for San Jose, why we're going to probably see a bunch of roster moves here. So we'll just get to that in just 1 second. All right, before we finish up, of course, well, thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen every day. For your second listen, go find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Steal and Flip provide daily fantasy tips to give you the edge over your league mates, all while making you a smarter hockey fan. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So what's next, right? As we kind of enter this last stretch here of training camp preseason. So expect a flurry of roster moves by the Sharks here as Barracuda training camp is set to get started on Tuesday. We've already seen a couple moves as Egor Chernyshov and Philip Beested have officially been sent down to the Barracuda. And I would expect a ton of these Sharks players tonight that need to go through waivers. I would expect that process to happen on Tuesday. So just a reminder, all the guys who are not waivers exempt, they are going to have to go through the waivers process to get down to the Barracuda. So my guess would, again, I'm just kind of playing, guessing right now. We'll know more. You'll know more about 11 a.m. Pacific time on who's getting sent down. But I would expect to see guys like Afanasyev, who else? So Afanasyev, Olsen, those like guys like that, Colin White, Samuel LeBurge, Shane Bowers, Jimmy Huntington, Pavel Regenda, Patrick Giles, all those guys among the forward groups are going to have to go through waivers to be sent down to the Barracuda. Same thing with Cole Clayton, Jack Thompson, and Lucas Carlson among the defensemen, and Jacob Skarek as well. So you'll probably see a ton of these guys get put on waivers. With the waiver process, basically every team will look at it and say, do we want to claim this guy? If they do, they go straight to their NHL roster. But as we're seeing right now, like a lot of these, kind of first wave, most of ththese guys are expected to kind of clean. None of these guys I'm really worried about other than Jack Thompson as guys where I think the Sharks should have any trouble getting through waivers. And even Jack Thompson, I do think will get through waivers. So I expect a flurry of moves there. And then whatever guys who are waivers exempt, so guys like Haltonen, we'll see if like Cam Lutton sticks around. I know he hasn't played yet, so maybe they keep him around for a little bit right now. But I would expect Holton and maybe actually I think Cardwell will probably stick around because he's had a really good camp so far. But kind of expect a lot of those Barracuda guys to get sent down here so that way they can start getting ready for the Barracuda season. Should have a much smaller Sharks roster as they kind of start getting ready for these last 3 games here. Really try to figure out who's going to be on the roster, who like all the cuts they kind of have, the final cuts that they have to make. So speaking about the final cuts in these last 3 games, I do think these are going to be big time games for San Jose as they try to lock up these last roster spots and stuff. So and I think that's what a lot of this is going to be used for is, okay, expect a heavy dose of Miso, expect a heavy dose of Dickinson, heavy doses of Quentin Musty. I don't know if they'll play in the back-to-back on Friday, Saturday. We'll see. But expect heavy doses of a lot of these guys here as the Sharks are going to have to, again, make some decisions. And, the good news, the travel isn't too bad for the back-to-back because it's Fridays in Vegas. So Wednesday they play the Ducks in San Jose, and then Friday in Vegas and Saturday in Utah. So it's not it's a big jump from Vegas to Salt Lake City there. But Yeah, I expect a heavy dose of these guys here to try to kind of figure out if they're ready to stick around on the NHL roster, and as they, get ready for at least their 9 games tryout here for, like Dickinson and Misa. And then the nice thing with Musty, right, is he can go to the AHL no problem here. But I that's kind of the next things there. So yeah, I'm we're getting close here. We're getting close. So, and I think the other thing just to keep an eye out too is when does Mac Celebrini kind of fully join the team? Because he's still, when they get to some of the drills and stuff like that, he's still kind of getting pulled aside here. I know they want to get him into some preseason action. I'm probably circling Friday, to be honest, with Celebrini, right? Against, maybe Wednesday, but like he hasn't really been getting the physical drills. So hopefully like Tuesday, I think Tuesday, if he's like getting back into like the contact drills, that's probably a good sign that he'll be ready to go sooner rather than later. But I'm kind of circling Friday's game against Vegas as the game where maybe we see Celebrini kind of get into the action here. So yeah, this is a big week, right? Big week for these for your Misas, big week for your Dickinsons, big week for your Musties to see if they can get back and claim a spot here and take a spot, and then which of these young guys, like, can I Cardwell continue to hang around? Can Colin Graff take a spot? Like, what do you do with your Grundstroms and your Tidal Andreas and your Barkley Goodrows? Like, what do you do with some of these guys here? And because at some point, like, you can't keep your Cardwells down forever. So yeah, a lot of good stuff coming this week. So that's kind of what big storylines I think through the end of the week here to keep an eye on here with practice and stuff. So that's gonna be it for me tonight. We'll be back tomorrow. Probably recap all the roster moves and all that fun stuff. So make sure you follow along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. Follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and on TikTok at Locked On Sharks. Follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at My Fry Hole. Till tomorrow. Bye, friends.